Some other news now, some Ohioans, so many of Ohioans, in fact, are struggling financially, and that means they just might not be able to afford things like rent. Just a few weeks ago, courts were asked to delay eviction and foreclosure proceedings. Let's take a listen to what Lieutenant Governor Jon Husted had to say.
We don't want people to get evicted, but the apartment owner has to pay his mortgage. And if we don't give them that ability to defer that payment for 90 days, then they get foreclosed upon. What happens to the people in the apartment who are there?
Susan Choe from Ohio Legal Help is back with us again. Susan, thank you. That interview, that sound from Jon Husted was back in April. Where do things stand right now with evictions in our state?
Sure. So it depends where you live. So for folks here in Franklin County, the Franklin County Municipal Court, which is where evictions are heard, has essentially an eviction hold until June 1st. So Franklin County won't be hearing evictions until June 1. Now, that does give tenants some time to try to work with their landlords, because while that puts the eviction on hold, the rent is unfortunately still accumulating, and so folks should reach out to their landlords to see if they can make a payment arrangement.
All right, Susan, thank you. And we did get a question from someone today, and in fact, they are trying to pay their rent, and their question, we're going to get that up on the screen for you, is, I'm 2 months behind on my rent behind this virus, and I'm self-employed. My landlord gave me a 3-day notice. Will I be evicted?
So if the if the viewer is in Franklin County, at least not until after June 1. If you are unfortunately 2 months behind, regardless of the reason, your landlord can attempt to evict you for non-payment of rent. It's just, unfortunately, in this time, the way that the law is set up. Now, there might be some community resources that might be available to get the individual caught up on rent. So I know United Way in some locations and some community action agencies and other folks have set up some rental assistance. And hopefully the viewer will be able to enter into some arrangement with their landlord.
Okay, great. We do have another question to ask you about, and that question is about leases. Is there something in particular that renters should look for in their leases that can protect them now or later?
So contracts are different for a lot of different situations. Usually a landlord-tenant lease has some boilerplate language, but if you're looking in your lease, you should see if there's something in there about maybe paying rent, like is there grace periods, some things like that in your contract that may help you. There's generally, in most leases, not a right to essentially pay rent late by a couple of months, so this is going to be a really difficult situation for folks. But look for grace periods in your lease. Now, we've also had some questions on Ohio Legal Help about breaking leases, and so sometimes there is information in your lease about how to go about that without incurring costs. So folks should look for those type of provisions.
All right, Susan, it sounds like people need to read the fine print and do a lot of communication. Yep. So we thank you for those answers and that perspective. Susan Choe, if you haven't been with us, is the Executive Director of the Ohio Legal Help, and we are going to check back in with her with a few more of your questions in a little bit. Scott?